The rain had just begun to fall over Shibuya, coating the neon lights in a hazy reflection across the pavement. Aiko Tanaka walked quickly, her hands tucked into the pockets of her oversized coat. The world around her seemed louder than usual. The chatter of late-night crowds, the hum of traffic, and the faint sound of music leaking from bars all pressed in on her. Yet inside her chest, there was only silence. Aiko was 19, a university student with quiet ambitions and a notebook always by her side. But tonight, her notebook was forgotten, and her ambitions felt far away. She had been carrying a secret for weeks. A secret that weighed more with every step she took. Home was only a few blocks away, in a small apartment on the edge of Shinjuku. She could already picture the familiar glow of the kitchen light, where her mother, Keiko, would be waiting. Aiko's mother was a woman of discipline, a seamstress who held her head high even in hardship. The thought of her mother's eyes, sharp and unyielding, made Aiko's stomach twist. As she reached the door, her hands trembled. She paused, pressing her forehead against the cold surface of the metal frame. 1,000 excuses flickered in her mind. She could lie, she could delay, she could bury the truth a little longer. But she knew the silence between her and her mother would only grow heavier. The sound of the key turning echoed louder than the city outside. Aiko stepped in. The warm air of the apartment brushed against her face. Her mother turned from the table, a teacup still steaming in her hands. For a moment, there was only stillness. Then her mother's eyes narrowed, sensing something was wrong. Aiko opened her mouth, her voice faint, nearly breaking. The words came out before she could take them back. "Ma, I am pregnant." The room went quiet. The teacup slipped slightly in her mother's grip, though she did not let it fall. Silence filled the space, heavier than the rain outside. Aiko's heart pounded as she waited for the first word from her mother's lips. Keiko's lips parted at last, but the warmth that Aiko had once known was absent. Her voice was sharp, like glass cutting through silence. "Foolish girl," she said. "How could you bring shame upon this house?" The words sliced through Aiko's chest. She felt small in the presence of her mother, smaller than she had ever been. Her knees nearly buckled beneath her, yet she forced herself to stand tall, even as her hands trembled. Keiko turned away, setting the teacup firmly on the table. The sound of porcelain against wood was louder than thunder in Aiko's ears. Her mother's shoulders were rigid, her jaw clenched. The air between them became cold, carrying a judgment that seemed impossible to escape. Aiko wanted to speak, to explain, but her voice caught. No explanation could erase the disappointment etched into her mother's face. Keiko's words continued, quiet but merciless. "You have destroyed your future. Do you understand? There is no room for mistakes like this." The night dragged on. The rain outside grew heavier. And Aiko, though standing only a few feet from her mother, felt as though an ocean had risen between them. That night, Aiko lay awake in her small bedroom. The ceiling above seemed to press down upon her. Shadows stretched across the walls, twisting into shapes that made her uneasy. She hugged her pillow tightly, trying to silence the echo of her mother's words. Her phone buzzed quietly on the desk beside her. A message from Ren, the boy she had once trusted, blinked on the screen. But her fingers hesitated before reaching for it. She did not open it. The thought of his voice, his promises, only deepened the ache within her chest. Beyond the thin walls, she could hear her mother moving about, restless even at midnight. The shuffling of feet, the quiet closing of doors. It was not the home Aiko remembered. The comfort had been drained, leaving only emptiness. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she forced them back. She had learned long ago that tears solved nothing in this house. Instead, she pulled her blanket tighter and whispered into the darkness, though no one could hear her. "I will find a way. I must." The following morning, Tokyo streets buzzed with their usual energy. Trains rattled past, businessmen hurried along, and students filled the sidewalks. But for Aiko, every sound felt distant. Her own thoughts drowned the noise of the city. She made her way to university, her steps unsteady. In the lecture hall, the chatter of classmates swirled around her. Friends spoke of exams, of weekend plans, of fashion and music. None of it reached Aiko. She sat in silence, her gaze fixed on the notebook before her, the pages blank. Two girls behind her whispered, laughter spilling from their lips. Aiko felt the sting of their eyes even without turning around. Did they know? Or was it only her imagination painting every glance as judgment? When the class ended, she walked through the campus garden. The autumn leaves fell gently, catching in her hair. But even the beauty of the season could not soften the weight she carried. The world moved forward. She, however, felt trapped in one still moment. Back at home, Keiko avoided her daughter. The once shared meals became silent, the kitchen table half empty. Conversations were reduced to short commands, spoken without warmth. Aiko found herself recalling fragments of her childhood. Nights when her mother had held her close, humming lullabies to soothe her to sleep. Days when Keiko had worked tirelessly to provide for them both, her hands raw from sewing. There had been love once. Fierce, unshakable love. But now, that love seemed buried beneath layers of disappointment and fear. Aiko longed to reach out, to remind her mother of what they once shared. Yet each time she tried, Keiko's eyes hardened, and the words died in her throat. The past was a memory she could not hold on to. The present was a shadow she could not escape. Weeks passed, and the secret began to show. Aiko could no longer hide it beneath loose sweaters and careful silence. Each glance in the mirror reminded her of what was coming, unstoppable and real. One evening, as she returned from the library, she stopped at a small shrine tucked between narrow streets. The lanterns glowed softly, the air rich with the scent of incense. Aiko pressed her palms together and closed her eyes. She whispered a confession not meant for ears, but for the gods alone. That she was afraid, that she did not know if she was strong enough, that the child within her was both a burden and a fragile miracle. The shrine offered no answer, only stillness. But in that silence, Aiko felt something stir within her. A quiet resilience, fragile yet undeniable. At home, the tension grew heavier. Neighbors began to notice changes, their eyes lingering too long when Aiko passed by. Whispers followed her, quiet but sharp. Keiko grew harsher, as though shielding herself from shame. Her words became shorter, her tone sharper. The distance between mother and daughter grew vast, yet they were bound by walls too thin to escape each other. Late at night, Aiko overheard her mother speaking on the phone. The voice was low, tense, filled with worry. She could not hear every word, but the meaning was clear. Keiko was afraid of what others would say, afraid of the stain on their family name. Aiko pressed her ear to the wall, her chest tightening. Her mother's fear was louder than her own pain. And in that moment, Aiko realized she was utterly alone. It happened on a Sunday morning. The sun streamed through the window, catching the dust in golden beams. Aiko stood at the kitchen counter, pouring tea into a cup. Her hands shook, the liquid spilling slightly. Keiko entered, her eyes immediately falling upon the small swell beneath Aiko's shirt. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence pressed heavily, too sharp to ignore. Finally, Keiko's voice cut through, colder than before. "You should not keep it." The words froze Aiko in place. Her hands trembled so violently that the cup slipped, shattering against the floor. The sound echoed through the apartment, sharp and unforgiving. Aiko's breath caught in her chest. Her mother's gaze was relentless, offering no comfort, no compromise. In that instant, the fragile thread between them nearly snapped. Aiko fled the apartment that evening. The streets of Shinjuku glowed with neon signs, their lights flickering against wet pavement. Crowds moved endlessly, yet she felt invisible among them. She wandered aimlessly, past arcades and small ramen shops, past the laughter of strangers. The city was alive, 1,000 stories unfolding around her. But hers was a story she could not share. Her footsteps carried her to the edge of the Sumida River. She stood there, watching the water ripple beneath the city lights. The air was cool, carrying the scent of autumn. She wrapped her coat tightly around her, her thoughts louder than the rushing water below. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a life beyond her mother's walls. A life where she would decide her own path. The thought was both terrifying and strangely freeing. The following dawn, Tokyo stirred awake. Trains screeched into motion. Markets opened their doors, and the hum of life returned. Aiko returned home, her body exhausted, but her heart steady. She stepped quietly into the apartment. The air was heavy, yet different from the night before. Keiko sat at the table, her face pale, her eyes distant. She did not speak. Aiko crossed the room and sat opposite her mother. Neither moved, neither looked away. For a long time, the silence was unbearable. Then, Keiko drew in a breath, as though preparing to speak words that had waited far too long. But before they could leave her lips, Aiko's hand rested gently on the table, her gaze unflinching. The silence between them deepened, and the weight of unspoken words filled the air. The story was not yet over.